Can you walk and chew gum at the same time? Eat and take notes? Good morning, everybody. We're just going to dive in. So you feel free to chew in front of me. That's perfectly fine. And eat and take notes. And we are in week 3. And if you want to open up your workbooks to the page on personality, which is session 3, understanding your personality. We'll get started. While you're turning, let me just offer a quick prayer for all of us. Father, I pray that you will allow us to pay attention to our lives and understand ourselves in ways that maybe we haven't thought this deeply about ourselves. Help us to think deeply and pay attention to what's emerging out of this deep dive into our lives. Ultimately, I pray for everyone that's part of this Real Moms group that at the end of our time, in I guess it would be next week, that you will reveal callings and give us marching orders for the days ahead. I pray in Jesus' name, amen. So I wasn't planning on doing this, but it just hit my mind, so I'm going to go. I'm just going to respond. I'm going to react and respond. Throughout this whole day, throughout this whole time, since the talk part, the lecture part's going to be short, I want you to feel free to ask questions. It was interesting. We did Monday night. I met with the Zoom Real Moms group, and probably because of the setting, we ended up having a longer discussion. They asked a lot of good questions. It was really good. So I thought, I want to give you that option too. If you want to ask any questions for clarity, I am happy to engage any questions you have. So before we jump into the personality part, do you have any questions about what we've covered so far? Let me do a brief review, and then you can ask any questions you want. So the fact of the matter is, there are important aspects of our lives, from job and career. Roles are crucial, of course. And then there's this aspect of calling, which most people don't take the time to process deeply, and yet, gosh, it's one of the most important things about us. So that's what we're doing. We're thinking deeply about your calling. That summons that's on your life, essentially to love, in some way to bring healing to the rest of the world. And what we have been looking at is the idea that your uniqueness, your story, your personality, your skill set, and your passions all conspire or are elements that point to this summons on your life, this calling. And so we're taking each element one at a time. Last week we spent some time talking about life story. And I maintain, now that I've been doing this a number of years, that the shocking thing, not the shocking thing, the thing that is somewhat surprising, I guess, is how many callings emerge directly out of life stories. And now that you've looked at your life story, I think some of you indicated, and many have indicated, that, wow, I can see something already in my life story that might point to a calling. So this week we're going to go deeper, and this is, I guess, if most people think this is the fun part, talking about personality. People enjoy it, so hopefully this will be enjoyable for you. But before we dive into the personality part, any questions about what we've covered so far, or any particular revelations you've had to this point that you would like to think more deeply about? Any questions? You may not. Yes. Okay, we're gonna bring the microphone around so that
Yes.
the onliners.
Yes, so the online people can hear. We'll just speak in the mic. Thank you.
Okay, when we were discussing job and that it has 3 ways that it interacts with calling,
Right.
You had mentioned that they either don't intersect, they touch, or they become one. Is there one that is better, or is there one that is preferred than others?
Yeah, the simple answer is no. One is not better than the other. I guess the assumption that someone might make is, well, the best thing is to throw myself head over heels into it and have them become one. That's not necessarily the best, because that might not be the life that God has for you. And you could make a point, I suppose, that if they're separate and you've got this job, you combine it with your role, which is just eating up all your time, how in the world do I have time to pursue that which is my calling? And we get into, especially in Christianity, we have this guilt mindset that I've got to do more, and what should I do? I don't think God looks at the legacy we leave based on volume. I think he wants to, so that's why the three of them are equally legit, as long as we are mindful of our calling, and when the opportunity arises, we engage. Does that help?
Yeah, mostly I was thinking about if those things just didn't intersect, is that wrong? I mean,
yeah, it's not wrong at
okay.
all.
Yeah.
Now, I will say this. Regardless of what level that they do or do not intersect, the key, and this has become a mantra that I repeat over and over again, as long as we're paying attention to what's happening around us, every opportunity, and we know what our calling is, we have a sense of what our calling is, and pay attention, in the most unlikely settings, it'll pop up, and as long as we're ready to engage at that level, that's the key. And that's when legacies are born right at, in the middle of, my gosh, I'm in the middle of my job, and yet I have had this opportunity to do this thing. So yeah, not one is better. One is not better than the other.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Great question. Any other questions? Yes, Brooke.
I don't know if this is true for others, but I can tend to bend my narrative to fit my perception. So I might think that I'm in my calling. Are there indicators or things that we should look out for that might be pointing us in a different direction, that signals we might be missing?
Yeah, that's a more mystical question that takes some meditation and conversation and probably interaction with somebody you trust, so that they can look. If I get what you're saying, what am I missing? Am I missing something in my story that perhaps points in a different direction than the way? It's possible, but I would say, if you're, to use your phrase, if we are bending your narrative or telling your story to point in a specific direction, that's not necessarily a bad thing. That is your passions infecting your story. That's not necessarily a bad thing, because the passions are a separate element to life story. And when you're worked up about something and you feel strongly about something, we tend to look back on our story and see that everywhere. That's not necessarily a bad thing. On the other hand, there may be some things that you're missing, in which case it's probably good to have an advisor, a friend, mentor, that you can sit down and say, here's my life story, what have I missed? That may be pointing in the direction of a calling. Now, that's a little bit general, but does that help? Okay. Great question, by the way. Really good question. Other questions? All right, let's go on to the second element that we are examining. They build on each other. They impact each other. Your life story is crucial. And I think I told you this last week. Let me clarify if I didn't. Your life story and your passions. Your life story is simply the history of your life, the good, the bad, the wondrous, and the ugly. Okay, that are lives. Your life story, and then your passions, what burns inside of you, and the desires of your life, and the way you see the world. Those two tend to be the calling indicators. We could probably just spend time looking at your life story and passions and arrive at some kind of basic calling that is your life. But where the color comes in and the modification comes in is when we add to that your personality and your skill set. Because your personality and your skill set then modify your calling and essentially can tell you, if that's my calling, here's how I'm going to go about doing that calling. Here's how I'm going to, here's the ways, because of my personality and skills, that I will go about it. And we're going to play a little game a little bit later about skills. And when I say a little game, it's a little Dave game, where we will pretend we're different skills and see how we'd approach the same calling in different ways. But we'll do that in a couple minutes. So personality, let's talk about personality. People love to talk about personality. There are roughly 3 trillion personality tests out there. That's an exaggeration, of course, but there's every kind of personality test. And I've taken seemingly most of them. The interesting thing is we like knowing who we are. We like having an identity. We like saying I'm an IFTJ. I am a INTP. That's the Myers-Briggs. Or I'm a Labrador. Or I'm a Woo. Or I'm a Green. Or there's different personality tests measure with their own unique styles and ways. But mostly every personality test, it gives you a neutral reading. For example, let's use Myers-Briggs. There are essentially 8 words that at the end of the day, you're going to be 4 of those 8 words are going to be ascribed to you when you take the test, the Myers-Briggs. You're either an extrovert or an introvert, a sensor or an intuitive. Either you're a thinker or a feeler, or a judger or a perceiver. These are just the words that somewhere some genius came up with in a brilliant way to help define who we are. But it's neutral. I mean, there's nothing, it doesn't give you great joy or great sorrow to say, I'm an extrovert or an introvert. There's nothing about it that gives you all excited to say, well, I'm a sensor or I'm an intuitive. They're just neutral. Helpful. And because of the neutrality of different personality tests, I like the Enneagram because the Enneagram is not simply a neutral assessor of your personality. The Enneagram shows you at your heights and shows you at your depths. It can indicate you when you are at your high-flying best, world-changing self, and it could show you how you are the worst person you can even imagine and you can't get through another day. That's what I love about the Enneagram. Now, because of that, I want to bring a caveat about studying our personality through the Enneagram. We're going to focus mostly on the best you, the healthy you. What it's like to be a healthy 4 or a healthy 3 or a healthy 1 or a healthy 6. We're not going to focus for our purposes here on the unhealthy you. And here's why. The unhealthy aspects of your personality are calling killers. The healthy aspects of your personality are calling builders. So, we're going to focus only on the positive, you at your most healthy. Now, but here's why the negative is important. Once you discover your calling and you have worked through your life story and you've mixed in now your personality and your skills and your passions, you're going to get moving in a direction, hopefully get moving in a direction to live out your calling. It's then you need to pay particular attention to the unhealthy aspects of who you are, because I guarantee you, if you are not fulfilling your calling, which you've identified, it's likely because a negative aspect of your personality is getting in the way. For example, someone be brave enough to tell me what your number is on the Enneagram, and one of the major negative characteristics of that number when you are unhealthy. Oh, I'll start with me. I'm a 3, okay? And with a 3, threes can be the most fake people in the world because we are the shapeshifters of the Enneagram world. We can be whatever we need to be in the room, whatever room we're in, and as a result of that disingenuous, when we are completely unhealthy, I am manipulating people in my life when I am completely unhealthy. And that, when that's discovered, will kill my calling. It will kill my calling because I'm just performing. Okay? That's me at my most unhealthy. You were going to say something.
So I'm a 2, and some of the negatives for a 2 is like you're self-serving, and you also belittle other people.
Mm-hmm. And you can see how that, like, take the positive of a 2. You know, you're the most loving people, and everyone loves a 2, and you feel loved by a 2. But when you are self-serving, that'll destroy your calling, right? Somebody, give me another example. You had an example.
Yeah, I'm a 9, a peacemaker. I don't think there's many 9s, but
More than you think.
yeah. And the negative is sloth, I think, or laziness, just complacency.
Right. So of course, the positive of the 9 is that we all feel you're the unity builders, and you all bring the sense of well-being together as a group. But if you're just lazing around, it's going to kill your calling. Somebody else. Brooke.
I'm a 6, so at my unhealthiest, I trust absolutely no one and think everybody has an evil plan or is out to get me.
Oh, yeah. Okay, one more. I want to make sure we understand this distinction between the high side and the low side. Yes, go ahead.
I identify as a 4, and 4s are very in tune with their emotions, but I tend to, I guess you could say, be self-absorbed in my emotions and like only think about my feelings toward a particular situation.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So you can see then, for example, in your case, even if you have a sense of your calling, if you devolve into self-absorption, you're going nowhere with your calling. So let's turn it around. Let's talk about the positive, because that's what we want to focus on here. Somebody tell me your number and tell me when that number, and you could talk about yourself or just in general about that number, when you are at your best, when you are at your healthiest, how can that impact your calling? I'll start with me. So as a 3, and I also have my 8 is as strong as my 3. So I am like, by the way, as a 3 with an 8, I am like the worst person in the world when I'm unhealthy, okay? Nobody likes me when I'm unhealthy because not only am I fake, I'm overbearing. Isn't that wonderful? That's a wonderful combo. But when I'm at my best, as a 3, 3s are the people that say, oh, this is where you are, but you need to get here. Like you're at A and you want to get to B, I'll get you there. That's what 3s do. They can do it through structure and they can do it through influence. I'll get you where you need to go. That's what 3s do. And when I'm at my best, that's what I do. When you're at your best, what is your strength? Did I see you were a 9?
I'm a 9.
Okay.
So I'm a 9, and when I'm at my best, isolation and things like that are what it feels like my calling is starting to become clear to me. And so when I'm at my best, I'm connecting with people who are unconnectable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and let me ask you, let's go to life story. Have you seen this play out in your life story too?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Somebody else. Give me your number and what is you at your best? And what's cool, by the way, let me go back to what you just said. You just connected the dots. You're connecting the dots between your life story and your personality. and wait till we mix in your skill set and your passions. Somebody else, you're at your best. What is your strength?
I'm a 7. I'm a 7 in case you didn't already know. And when I'm at my best, I'm encouraging and inspiring and getting people involved and getting people excited about Jesus or what they are supposed to do in Jesus.
Absolutely. And it's, imagine when you pair a healthy 7 and a healthy 9. The 7 will get the party started and get everybody going and feel like this is going to be an awesome thing. And the 9 says, and when they all get here, they're going to feel loved. I'm going to make sure we're all unified.
It's working. That's what we do, right?
Yeah? See? 7s and 9s. That's how you work together. Do we have any 1s in the room? Oh, this is a surprise. No 1s?
I identify strongly as a 1, but I'm slightly higher as a 6.
As a 6?
Yeah, so it's very close.
Interesting. So let's talk about the reason why I mentioned 1s. The two numbers that of the people I've worked with, 1s and 6s, sometimes 4s, tend to beat themselves up a lot. All right? 6s because they're worried about everything most of the time, and 1s because their own sense of self-judgment is so strong, you don't have to put a 1 down because they've already put themselves down so much. And as a result of that, 1s at their worst just are almost paralyzed because they don't know if they're doing the right thing. But at your best, tell me what you're like at your best. The 1 as you identify as a 1.
Let's see. Productive, reliable, fair, honest, orderly, self-disciplined.
Mm-hmm. Are you a perfectionist?
I am.
Okay. Yeah. See, I'm married to a 1, so I can go on and on about 1s. Which, by the way, here's an interesting. I think Kara has the book, The Road Between Us, or The Path Between Us. It's an interesting second step. If you haven't read that, it's how numbers interact with each other, right? So 1s and 3s are an interesting mix because there is only 2 colors to a 1, black and white, right? It's only right or wrong. And to a 3, nothing but gray, baby. Because we can shade everything. Can you imagine the best thing that this church ever had was my wife, who, as a 1, she was like my, because I'm not a pastor, I'm going to use this term now. My wife has an internal BS meter that is pegged. And as a result, I couldn't get away with anything if I wanted to. So that's what 1s do. The key thing about a 1, I think, is the level of integrity you bring to the world. It's remarkable. Come on, let's keep the positivity flowing. Somebody else tell me, what is your number and what is the strength of who you are when you are at your healthiest? We had a 2, we have a 1, we have 9. Any 8s in the room? We have 7, 6s. Any 5s? 4s, 3s, 2s, 1s. Yes?
I was just going to say, it's funny, I'm a 2.
A 2.
I think, I just know one thing that I laugh about is I love to send calendar invites. I'm like super, just like to keep everyone organized and where they need to go. And so my husband always makes fun of me that I'm like the queen of calendar invites, just because I like to take care of our family and have everyone know where they need to be. And I just love hosting and volunteering. And I think that's kind of the strength of when I'm healthiest. It just makes me happy.
Yep.
Yeah.
What we should have done a year ago when the virus hit is we should have taken all the 2s in the nation and put them in charge. Because then all the 2s would make sure that everyone's has someone to talk to process with, and in relationship. Now, instead, we had unfortunately, we had other personality types that were ruling the day. Pandemic is not a great place for an 8. They don't make it very manageable. All right. Any other perspectives from your personality type? Any questions? Any questions about your personality vis-a-vis calling? And then we're going to play a little game. Any questions? All right. Yes. Yeah.
When answering the questions in the workbook about questions about your personality, it specified about your personality type. So is that when, and I know this kind of seems like a silly question, but not everything when you're reading your Enneagram number applies to you. So if there is a strength that you notice that you're reading about your Enneagram number, but it doesn't really apply to you, do you still put it for a healthy characteristic?
Ignore it.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, because
So that goes for unhealthy.
because
too,
it's
then.
not. What's that?
That goes for the unhealthy. then, too.
No. It could be neither.
Yeah.
It could be neither. Because any personality test, no personality test is absolutely pure. Like there are days the characteristic, I live out the characteristics of a 3. Some days I live out the characteristics of a 8, and then I'm a 4 wing. So there are days that I am like straight 4, okay? And so that's why the book, The Road Back to You, is good in one sense, in that you can go down at the beginning of each chapter of the book is a, I don't know, something like 10 or 12 statements that you can go check, not check, check. And a lot of people will say, okay, there are 12 statements there. Wow, 9 of them nailed me. 3 of them are not me. So discard the 3. That's a great question. Yes?
So by nature of us all being moms, I know when we went through the Enneagram with Cassie, a lot of us came back as really strong 2s. And we kind of discussed about how you're supposed to be taking it as how you are outside of just parenting and that kind of thing. But the reality is a lot of us, that's our entire self right now, it feels like.
Yeah.
And so while doing all of this, we kind of kept in mind that our station in life, you know, how that might right now, our role influences that part of it.
Absolutely.
How do you account for that as you're looking at that as it impacts calling? Does calling change? I don't know if that's a clear enough question, but just...
Yeah, that's why if we just looked at, let's just say all we looked at was the Enneagram, you might arrive at a conclusion of what your calling is, and it would be very undeveloped. That's why we have to take our life story, which includes our roles wrap into our life story, and our skill set, and our passions to combine. And do callings change? Yes and no, based on our I maintain that callings evolve, okay? Sometimes I've seen people have a calling that feels like a left-hand turn, but that's probably because they didn't identify it earlier. And what I encourage people to do is to see your calling as a higher level and what you do as the application of that calling. That's what normally people discover. Oh, wow. I didn't realize my calling was that. That's because you've been looking more through a very small lens at your life. They evolve. My calling has evolved tremendously, but it's not like I went from a calling to just illustration of being a mentor to caring for the creation. No, it has evolved over time, and it probably should. At 65 years old now, my calling is far more defined, feels more like a destiny than it was when I was 25 years old. I was pretty general, and I think my calling is to care for kids, students. Well, it has evolved. Does that help? Okay. Other questions?
Jenny, did you have a question, Jenny?
Yeah. So when I took a test, I'm a 2 wing 1, and
Uh-huh.
I'm confused on what the wing means. Does it mean that I'm also kind of a strong 1, or how does that tie together?
Yes, it says that you, okay, in the strictest sense, you present primarily as a 2, but the characteristics of the 1 have a strong influence on the way you go about being a 2. Or there are days that you probably look more like a 1 than a 2 because of what you're focusing on. So they influence you. And also pay attention to other strong areas. It's not just the wing that influences you. Like for me, I didn't show up as an 8, but I'm so strong 8. There are certain aspects of it that there are some days I look like an 8, not a 3. And do you have another strong?
9.
9, okay. And that would be an interesting for you to look at what is a 2 wing 1 with a strong 9. You have to have a strong people orientation in your life, right? Yeah, because you take the 2 and the 9. Yeah. But at the same time, it's that with your 1 influence, you have a very strong feeling of when a person is not being treated properly. You have this probably a sense of justice over human interactions and that comes out of your 2 and your 9. So that's how they all would, there are people, David Bell and others, who do real deep dives in the Enneagram. I'd recommend those 2 books, The Road Back to You and The Road Between Us, are huge, important to read to go a little deeper into this. But that's a great question. All right, let's play a little game. Let's say let's take a 2. Well, it doesn't matter. We'll take a 2, a 4, and a 7 are all friends, and they all decide that the calling on their life, what thing that just burns within them is that they cannot stand the idea that children would go without food. That is, their passion is that, and as a result of that, they say, we are going to do something together about food insecurity in our city or our country or whatever. We're going to do something about it. And we have a 2, what did I say? A 2, a 4,
2,
and
4,
a 7.
7.
They're 2, a 4, and a 7. They get their heads together. Tell me how each one of them would contribute to moving in that calling together. Because they're all going to have unique ways to approach it. Same passion, different approaches. I know you're thinking. Who would lead the discussion about what are you going to do? The 2, the 4, or the 7 would lead and say, okay, let's do this. Who would do that?
I would say the 4. I would say the 4 because they're the creative.
The 4 would probably think through ideas that maybe even no one else has thought about.
The 7. It's the 7.
The 7 would jump in, and what would the 7 do?
How are we going to do this? Get everyone excited.
And what would the 2's contribution be? Wait, I can't hear you. What's that?
What did you say, bro?
2's
Doing whatever they're told.
well, maybe, yeah. But in a positive sense, those of you who are 2's in the room, how would you contribute?
Be on the front line, like being the volunteer and loving on the people that we're serving. And
Yeah, you'd probably go along with the idea, but I'm just waiting for it to get started so that I can rub shoulders with people and be the face. Do you see how that works? What if we let's do it now that I got you thinking. Let's go do another thing. Let's say you've decided there are 3 of you together. Pick 3 numbers. Pick any 3 numbers. 1. A 1. 6. A 6. 8. And an 8. A 1, a 6, and an 8. Dear Lord. We got them together, and they've all have a passion to, they're deeply concerned about, let's pick one, about species extinction. They care about creation, and they are all animal people, and they're very upset about that, and they want to do something together. So a 1, what did we say? A 1, a 6, and an 8. How would they go about coming up with something to solve that world problem? Who would do what?
What's the 6 going to do, Brooke?
I mean, the 6 is going to have the plan. I mean, they'll see the problem and have all the details probably worked out before the first meeting.
Then how would the 1 play into that? How would a 1 approach that?
Emily, do you want to say Emily?
I'm going to ask the 1 over here to help us out here.
I would say that the 1 actually takes the plan and puts it into action. So they would be the one to decide or to say, let's do this way and that way.
Okay, awesome. And by the way, while that is going on, while the 1 is working out, 1 and 6s are very detailed people. So the 1s they'd be working, but the 6 would be also sitting there going, well, if we did that, here's what would happen. There's always risk analysis with the 6, right? But what's the 8 going to do? I actually gave it away. What's the 8 going to do? The 8, when the 3 of them come up with the idea, the 8's going to go, all right, you guys can sit around and talk about it, but I'm going to get it done. Okay, so you see how this works? All right, you can talk more about this when you're in your groups. Let's talk about skills, and then we'll wrap this up. That's another page in your workbook. Neil deGrasse Tyson, the astrophysicist, said this: what I want to do is find things that would represent my unique contribution to the world, the contribution that only I and my portfolio of talents can make happen. Now, what's the difference between skills and personality? Personality is the core motivations. It's how you think. The skills are the learned abilities, or in some cases, innate abilities that are unique to you. People have relational skills, and there's a whole series of questions in session 4. What are your relational skills, your writing skills, your creative skills, your manual skills, your intellectual skills? What are your skills? And I think I gave you the homework to ask people to tell you what they saw your skills were. I'm sorry, I need to stop here a second. Go back to the anagram. On your calling quilt is bullet point the qualities, the healthy qualities of your number, and transfer them onto the calling quilt. Now, if you want, you can have 1 per patch, or you can put a couple in a patch. What I like to do when I do the calling quilt with a person is take your number and put that number at the top of the patch so you know you're talking about Enneagram. So the 1s, you're going to have a little 1 at the top. If it was me, I'd have a little 3, and then I would list some of the qualities so that when you go back and look at your calling quilt, you have your whole life story, and then you have these patches that represent your personality. Similarly with your skills, when you arrive at your skills, you're going to take those skills and transfer them also to your calling quilt. So when you're done, honestly, when you're done with your life story, on your calling quilt, your personality and your skills, that's going to take up the biggest portion of your calling quilt, and then the passions will get added next week. And that usually is only 2 or 3 patches, because most people don't have dozens of passions. They usually have 1 or 2 that really burn in them. Okay, so skills. Let's talk a little bit about relational skills. I'm curious. I'm going to give you 3 options. You tell me which relational skill do you have, and I'm going to do a show of hands. There are 3 possibilities. Some people relationally are the best when they're one-on-one. It's just you and somebody else, where you influence somebody else in the way that your personality influences, but you do that best one-on-one. That's one relational skill. I'm talking about having a cup of coffee. I'm talking about talking on the phone. Just the 2 of you. Some people's relational skills are you're really adept at working with a group of people, especially a small group of people, and you have this way of understanding relational dynamics in a group, and you have this ability to draw everyone into the discussion. You're a good small group leader. You're a good team leader. That's a certain relational skill. And the third is the kind of relational skill where you can fill a room full of people, like this, or a big room, and you're able to stand in front, and you're able to relate to people in a way where life change happens. So imagine of those 3, and yes, the answer is yes, you can be 2 of them, but you probably have a strength in one of the 3. How many of you in the room, and those of you watching, how many of you are best one-on-one? Okay, so when one of your patches on your calling quilt, you should put, I'm best one-on-one. My skill is a one-on-one skill. How many of you are really good in working with a team or a group? Okay, again, that would show up on your calling quilt as a patch. Make sure you write that. Anybody here good with a big group? You can fill a room. So that's also an indicator that, and the reason why this is important, or you tell me, why is one of these 3 particular relational skills, how can that impact your calling? Why is one, how does it indicate how you'd pursue your calling? Why is it important to talk about these relational skills?
Calling is about people. It's about others.
Mm-hmm.
And so,
Here, say that
okay.
into the mic, Pamela.
So she said calling.
Calling is about others.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what were you going to say?
No, just along those lines, it gives you a better idea. Okay, so if you do better one-on-one, like your calling might be doing something with more of a one-on-one setting. Just like if you're somebody better in a small group, maybe you'd be doing something with a small group, and also the third, so
Yeah.
it just kind of gives you a better idea of maybe that would be a better fit for you.
Absolutely. And that what you both are saying is important, because what it does is when you realize I'm a small group or a team person, then it's likely whatever your calling is going to be motivating a group of people to move in that direction. Does that make sense? It's not just going to be you and one other person. Now, those of you that have, and I know most of you say you're best one-on-one. So when you determine your calling, because of that, is likely not going to be an institutional, big-scale calling. It's going to be something that will be applied to the person right in front of you, because that's what you're good at. That's how a skill intersects with calling. Sometimes when I do this, I talk about the fourth relational skill, and that there are some people who are able to impact lives through writing. Okay, so it's one-on-one. I add that. We have it as a separate skill here. But if you have the capacity, when you write, to change lives, then your calling likely will include writing. So if you're concerned about the environment, you're going to probably write about the environment. If you're concerned about hatred, let me give an illustration. There are 2 guys that are friends that I've known them a long time. They have 2 different skill sets two different relational skill sets with the very, very same. They are both, and their life story is completely different. They're both passionate about the broken place of hatred, particularly racism and bigotry, are deeply concerning to these two guys. One of the guys is black, the other one is white. So even their whole life story is very different because of their race. Also, one of them is very public. He can fill a room. And not only is his skill set in filling a room, he's also skilled in social media. That's a skill. He just knows how to leverage social media. And so he is a hip-hop artist. He is a DJ. And he is a professor at a university. He's an adjunct professor in R&B history. And he leverages that kind of influence to tell the story of the black community. It's fun following him in February because you'll learn more about the history of African Americans in the United States from him than just about anybody else. That's his skill set, same passion as the other guy who is white and is a school teacher and is quiet and is probably good one-on-one and one with a small group. He's a teacher in a school system, realized that the black students, he's white, the black students in his school district didn't have a way to relate to one another. He went to the administration and said, can I create a black students club or an organization, people of color, where they can meet together and share their lives together? And the school district said, sure. So here's this white dude who's concerned about the same thing as the black guy, but has a completely different personality, and he is operating, essentially taking on the same broken place. So your skill set is huge in operating in your passion. So look at session 4. What gifts and skills do people recognize in you? Take the stuff that your friends said about you and write it here, and then transfer some of them to the calling quilt. What gifts and skills do you recognize in yourself? Write them here and then transfer into your calling quilt. What are your relational skills, which we described? Do you have writing skills? What are your creative skills, manual skills, intellectual skills? Yeah. So, questions? Skills and gifts. Any questions? And talents. And by the way, spiritual gifts fit in here too. Gift of administration, the gift of pastoring, the gift of leadership, the gift of teaching, those from the scriptures. You can throw those in here too. By the way, last question, and then I'll leave you. Did any of your friends say something to you that really surprised you? Did anybody have any, or when what they said, you went, yeah, that's me? Anybody got any surprises that you didn't know about yourself? You did?
My husband allowed, the only in-first thing he said was I was organized. I had to push him for more, so he got in trouble. But that's not really what you're
So
Your husband
he got in trouble for
'cause
not
you-
being more
You
specific.
had to push him?
organized. He's known me for a real long time, and all he gave me was organized.
Organized.
So.
Dude. On behalf of men everywhere, I am sorry. Oh, good. Good. All right. Make sense? So by now, when you're done with this, your calling quilt's going to be fairly full with all of who you are. Next week, when I come back, we'll wrap this up. We'll talk about passions. And then it's going to be the more complicated thing is connecting the dots. And I'll give you some hints on how to do that. And as much as I can direct you, I will do that next week. Okay? Good.
So for their homework, for their assignment for next week, they pretty much need to just go through the book and have all the different questions answered?
Yeah, just for and especially next week, spend a few minutes working through what are you passionate about. And remember this about passions. We'll talk more next week. Passions are not the passions I'm talking about are the passions that look like love. So they're the passions that for other people or other circumstances or the broken places of the world. Because a passion that's directed to your own benefit is a hobby. A passion that's directed to somebody else's benefit is a calling. All right. Have fun. You're welcome. See you next week.